Good evening. We have two meetings tonight. The first is a meeting of the Cunningham Township Board. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Trustees Ammons.
Here.
Brown. Hazen.
Here.
Jacobson.
Here.
Miller.
Here.
Roberts.
Here.
Wu.
Here.
Mayor Marlin.
Here. Next up is minutes of the previous meeting from February 5th, 2018. Is there a motion for approval?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Jared, seconded by Mary Alice. Any corrections? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Okay, that motion passes. Are there any additions to the agenda for tonight? Okay. Public participation for the Cunningham Town Board. Doesn't look like we have any. Next up is committee to verify bills for the Town Fund and General Assistance Fund.
Good evening. So I sent you the detailed and summary expenses. We have a total in the Town Fund of $75,194.30 in expenditures, and in the General Assistance Fund, $31,196.62. That's for a total of $107,390.92. And I go into, in my report, some of the unusual expenses that you'll see in the town bills, but happy to answer any questions at this time.
Any questions for Danielle? Eric?
The only question that I would have is the trend line. We're not going to run out of money, I hope, before the end of the fiscal year?
No.
Okay.
No, in fact, in terms of programming, we're under budget. So we should be at about 60%. And for our programming, we're running closer to 40%. Okay. So we have some room. And we expected a ramp up from almost zero to something that will stabilize. In terms of general assistance participants, we should stabilize between 100 and 200 participants. I budgeted for 100. We'll definitely come under budget on that. Mm-hmm. For emergency assistance, I budgeted 50,000, and we will come under budget as well on that.
Okay.
Okay. Is there a motion to approve?
I move to approve.
Moved by Eric, seconded by Dennis. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. That motion passes. Reports of officers.
So I have a memo to the town board. I'm going to pass this out. With it actually also comes an invitation that I'll go over here for a SOAR planting workshop. Here we go. Oh, that's an extra copy. Assistance statistics, we had 86 walk-ins in February, up from 85 in January. That might mean we're starting to stabilize. We'll see if it's a trend over multiple months. We have a backlog of pending applications. We're really trying to work through. Most of the pending applications are actually denials because of missed appointments, et cetera. So we are doing a cleanup in this next week to get that number down. We have 72 general assistance participants, up from 67. I think the historic average has been about 120, just to give you a sense. And then I have them broken down here. You can see how many participate in community workfare, have pending SSI cases, et cetera. I do want to point out our homeless assistance program, which was launched November 17th, right before Thanksgiving, has been a pretty significant flow. I'd say we have more folks coming in for homeless assistance than for general assistance. We have served 94 residents, representing 42 households and 51 children as of today. And that does not include pending cases. That only includes folks we've actually been able to help. We have moved from unsheltered into permanent housing, 14 households or 20 people. We've moved from unsheltered into a hotel room, 20 households or 57 people. These are non-duplicated numbers, so they're discrete buckets. And we've prevented homelessness through eviction for 8 households or 17 people. And in 2 in several of those cases, there were angel donors involved in supporting as well as Township. And so we continue to thank the faith-based community because they come through for the homeless. I wanted to call your attention to a SOAR workshop. I've sent an invitation to the mayor. I also will be sending invitations to each of the council members. This is an initiative that's led by Cunningham Township. It's part of the Champaign County Continuum of Care, and the short version is the more, when we have people who are homeless and disabled or disabled and at risk of homelessness, really the federal government should be paying SSI and SSDI because they qualify. It's very difficult to get SSI and SSDI. It's a long process, and by the standard procedure is to basically reject all applicants, even worthy ones, unless you have a terminal illness. You basically are rejected outright, and you're required to go through a lengthy appeal process. Average times to get SSI, SSDI are between 1 and 3 years. It can take as long as 10 years. And so the issue for local governments is that essentially, the townships in both cities and throughout the county will support folks who are awaiting SSI and SSDI, and in that time frame, people become homeless, they may become more disabled. And so what we're doing is we're bringing a process in town that more than doubles the chances of success for disability applications. We applied in a competitive process, nationwide process. We're one of the few entities selected, and we're kicking it off on May 17th at Brookins Administration Center. It's an all-day strategy session, and it's really meant not for caseworkers, but for leaders and policymakers at this point to determine our path for how we're going to increase the number of successful disability cases in our community. So I'm really excited about this. I hope that you can make it. It does come with a free hot lunch, and there's going to be special guest star speakers who I will announce shortly once they're confirmed. That's our SOAR workshop. Internships, I just want to announce we're currently recruiting interns for the following positions: disability advocate who will work on the SOAR work, reentry advocate, homeless advocate, a garden intern. We're looking at a joint gardening project with the library in the property next to the township, and the garden would actually be one of the options for people doing community work fair. If they wanted to work outside, get some sun, work in the soil, they could do the garden, and we'll also then have fresh produce. And we also have a journalism and storytelling intern to help us tell the story of the face of poverty in Urbana. Just so you know, interns work on specific tasks of educational value. They are not workers. They are mentored by the supervisor, that's me, in one-to-one meetings, and they receive stipends for their work. They're typically 10 to 15 hours a week, and I would encourage folks to get in touch with me if you're interested, or you know someone who's interested. They do not have to be young. They do not have to be a student. Love to work with all folks. Homeless assistance issues. I just want to bring up that last month we had some significant issues with the 2 hotels we use for homeless assistance. America's Best Inn was deemed unsafe by our office after a break-in incident where an intoxicated man in a next-door room attempted to enter the room with a mother and child. Police, thank you, Urbana Police, you came very quickly, and our advocate arrived on the scene immediately. Management were very dismissive of that safety concern and resistant to moving our participant to another room, which they eventually did. Thanks to the Urbana Police saying this is not a safe room, but they shouldn't have needed to be told that. Lincoln Lodge was deemed unsanitary as bed bugs were reported, and we did see them visibly in rooms. Medical professionals at Carl also confirmed bites in 2 cases. They could not confirm that they're bed bugs. They can only confirm that there were definitely clusters of bites. Both hotels refused to address these issues. Unfortunately, we had to relocate all of our homeless residents. It's been a very long couple of weeks. and weekends. The city inspector, thank you, Nick, provided direction on sanitizing all the clothes and indicated he would inspect the problem hotel, and I'm waiting to hear back on the results of that. I contacted him again today. We did need to pay for laundry services, transportation, and prepay for hotel rooms at a new location. So I just wanted to point out that those are things that are typically not in the bills that you saw tonight. We have two families with we had two families with considerable medical issues. I distributed some gift cards because they didn't have clothes for the weekend, and we had to move them during dinner time, so they literally could not get to a soup kitchen. They had to be moving at that time. The good news is that but there were 7 families that we moved total, and there are 2 left, so we were actually able to get 5 into permanent housing this week, which is great. Thanks to the taxpayers of Urbana for helping with that. I have a memo on the social service process. What I'd like to do actually is to give Wayne the floor for a moment so he can give a short update, and then we can talk a little bit about social services if that works for you all. Go ahead, Dennis.
Can I ask a question about the SOAR workshop?
Oh, of course.
So will the township be sponsoring that? Are you doing that also with other partners as far as preparing and leading that workshop?
Absolutely.
You
So the partners is essentially we have a number of groups within the continuum of care. You can actually see the partners. The continuum of care as a whole voted to both support our application and also to support the process. So it's really kind of co-sponsored by the Continuum of Care and the organizations, Cunningham Township's Supervisor's Office and the National SOAR Technical Assistance Center out of DC. And they'll actually be coming and facilitating the workshop.
And then I really like the idea of you're creating a garden where people can go to work off time that they are required to. And I would encourage you to contact the coordinators of the Learman Garden. A lot of times, I mean, every year for the last, 8 or 9 years, that garden has been put in the early spring. Often they could use a little bit of help, and that might be another source for people to accrue time.
Oh, great. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah,
That's a great
so
idea.
the Learman Action Committee meets the second Tuesday of the month in the conference room of the Urbana Library. That's the Satterthwaite conference room. So their meeting, I think, is tomorrow, but my computer's down right now. I couldn't double check that.
Okay. And just as a note, we place community work fair participants in nonprofits throughout Champaign-Urbana. When I came on, none of them were located in Urbana. They were all Champaign, so our participants had to travel. And so we are working, and hopefully we'll have memorandums of understanding with 4 different spaces in Urbana shortly. And we're always open to working with new agencies. So if you have ideas, feel free to send them along. Any other questions before I pass it off to Wayne? And I'll come back and talk about social services, and we'll keep it moving.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Hi, everybody. During the month of March, my office is still taking senior exemption statuses and freezes. Seniors that haven't turned in statuses into the office are encouraged to do so. We're assisting seniors in processing exemptions as they come in. And again, the deadline for return is December 31st, 2018. We're currently working on a plan to consolidate all of our assessment data into one program. We currently have 4 different programs that contain our assessment data. And the hope is to consolidate everything into Visual PAMS Pro and use it to its full capabilities. In order to make that happen, there's going to be some data conversion costs that come with the updates. We're working with the software provider to get an accurate cost projection and time estimate for this project, but I hope to get started July 1st. I will continue my work reviewing the Cunningham Township sales ratio studies. Any factors that may need to be put on neighborhoods will be based off the sales studies in place to reach uniformity in assessments. We're continuing to work on new construction and assessment work. Unfortunately, the weather has not been as cooperative as we have liked. But as the weather is getting better, we're going to be out viewing and measuring properties that received building permits in 2017. I plan to have all of our assessing and valuing finished in May. Any questions? Mary Alice?
I was just curious where we are in terms of the senior exemptions. We're currently taking them. If you were to look at what we've done in the past couple of years, are we on track to have the same number? Are we up? Are we down?
No, we're about where we were last year. We actually had a surprising amount amount of seniors come in today for help with senior freezes and senior statuses. If we need to, we make home visits if needed. We've had relatives call from outside of the state asking us to go help their senior relatives who need help filling out the forms. So, but we're about where we were last year.
Okay, and so if people, they can walk into the office, they can call your office?
Yes.
Okay, great, thank you.
Well, so you have to get the form to us. You can call us with help filling it out, but we do need a signature on the forms. So either you can mail it in, walk it in, or if you need us to come out, we'll come out and help you and pick it up.
All right, thanks.
Any other questions? Okay, thanks, Wayne.
So last item on the agenda for the staff report is consolidated social service process. This is essentially discussion only item. It's not necessarily, we don't need a vote, which is why it's on the staff report. I did want to get your input. I sent this to you on Friday evening, and I wanted to basically focus on the proposed changes. And I can take your input both now and also I'm happy to take it over email. I've been working closely with city staff. Kelly is here this evening. And we've basically been taking a big picture look at the process. I've spoken with the mayor several times and gathered your input, Mayor, on this process as well. But essentially what we did is we stepped back and noticed that although there are a lot of, it's really an essential service that we provide through the consolidated social service funding, there are some things that we could change to tighten up the program. So focusing on the proposed changes in the near term, I think that I'd like to propose that the supervisor, along with the city staff, provide a consolidated social services annual report, which I know city staff already do for the CDBG funding. And there used to be a bar in New York City that had a very similar name. And so, to expand that and look at priorities, programming, and impact of the program as a whole. So really thinking of it as a program and not necessarily just individual grant items. This report would provide a landscape to you as kind of the budget setters of the state of social services and the needs in Urbana as they shift. It would reflect discussions that both myself and the city staff sit at Continuum Care Council of Service Providers for the Homeless and local funders, as well as our experience working with people to provide direct services. And then that report would include recommendations for priority funding areas for the year, and then we would discuss and confirm that. So you would kind of help to set the big bucket priorities. The second is that we should really look at how can we make sure that the funding pool keeps up with administrative costs, healthcare costs, and inflation generally. So if it sits stagnant, then it's actually shrinking. The application should be revised. There's some simplification. It's kind of like over the years, council members have thrown things into the bucket, and then the bucket gets bigger and bigger. And so, actually, I've already sat down with city staff, and Kelly has taken the lead on revising the application. I sent that revised copy to you on Friday, and interested, if you have feedback or thoughts, it's there for you. But we would like to release that soon, as it is now approaching the season. We, in this proposed change, the supervisor and the staff would review applications and rank them based on the priorities set and confirmed by council. And we'd prepare an initial funding proposal that, of course, can be discussed, amended, and voted on by council. But you would have something to start with and you would have there would be a link between that annual picture what the needs are, and then the funding pieces, and you could see how things are ranked and why they're ranked. And then we can, move things around. We would incorporate site visits to all grantees. There are some grantees that receive those now, but it would be incorporated for all so that there's better monitoring. Contracts would include language regarding mandatory reporting of program changes. This is an important piece because there's been a lot of change. There's a lot of churn in this field. And as I reported in some of the drawbacks, we have groups that, where programs disappear or they change significantly and funders are not notified in the process. So this would actually require notification in those contracts. Right now, there's 4 disbursements for most groups and 2 for the smaller groups. We would shrink that to 2 disbursements and then 1 simply because it's not enough money to justify for, and it's an administrative burden. And then the grant reporting should include narrative reporting on impact. So right now, it's really just numbers that is provided, and we're looking to do more narrative impact, and that's standard within grant reporting context. Last is we would encourage residents to report concerns about accessing services to the township. We would offer to track and follow up on all concerns, and we would share that with the city staff, and we can share that with the city council as well if you needed to. That way you have some data on, as you're funding this group, are residents for Urbana being able to access those? And I would say in most cases it's not an issue, but there's certainly, as we note in the difficulties, we've had problems like getting callbacks, programs disappearing, and sometimes not even having a phone call that works or a phone number that works or is answerable. And in every case, I've followed up on that to work to correct it. So I focused on the recommendations for the sake of time, but I'd like to hear your thoughts about those recommendations. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer.
Eric?
No, I think this really moves in the right direction. There was some commentary about how the process had gone previously. I'm very confident that the allocations we made, that we didn't have like simple clerical mistakes, that the allocations that were made were represented the consensus or the votes of the council members. But the big failing that we had, and I'm really sort of giving myself a dope slap because I recognized the failing, I even commented on it, but I didn't suggest any way to fix it. But the big failing we had is that we never had a chance to sit in a room together and talk about the applications, because that would have been a violation of the Open Meetings Act. And, for decades, I've been applying to federal agencies for science research grants, sometimes getting them, and those all were peer-reviewed by people who sat in a room and talked with each other about it. And sometimes I've been on those peer review panels. It was a really valuable process, and we couldn't do that. That was to me, that was always the big flaw in the system. But of course, the Open Meetings Act doesn't pertain to staff. So you guys can sit in a room and frankly talk about the pluses and the minuses of the particular proposals. So I think that's a big step in the right direction. I mean, I think that's great. And every once in a while you see an idea, and you say, "Oh, I wish I had thought of that." And this is one of those. So this is great. I think that the most important thing that could possibly be done, and you recognize this, I think, but you say it's going to be hard to do, is to bring Champaign into the game as co-funder, the city of Champaign or Champaign Township as co-funders of this program. Because always, I completely recognize that social services are underfunded. They're underfunded now, and we have been falling back because we've been doing constant dollars, as you sort of allude to, for years. But every time we do anything that requires expenditures, then we have to look at revenue, and every increment that we tax people in Urbana creates a disparity with Champaign, and we always have to be cognizant of that. So, boy, I really wish and hope that you can make some progress in that direction. That would be really tremendous.
And just on the topic, I mentioned in my memo here, I actually think, so I think there's two strategies in that regard, and I agree with you completely. The first is to continue at the funders table to advocate for consolidated social service funding that across many municipal entities. And I would include the county in that, and frankly, I would include all the townships in the county. Because those townships each receive general assistance, and they should be contributing to the pot. And I am starting to build, we are meeting with Urbana Township this week, so I'm starting to build relationships with the other townships, and so that we can start having those conversations. But the second is, if that, and maybe parallel with it, I'll tell you something that'll work really well, which is a fee-for-service model. Because basically, if someone comes to Township as a first stop shop for help, and we send them to someone, and then that person is served, and we can verify they receive service, and then we pay based on the service, the money will only go to Urbana residents.
Right.
And it'll be all the agencies in town very quickly will understand the difference between Urbana funding and Champaign funding. And they will have to, and Urbana residents will receive a much higher level of service than Champaign. And that shouldn't be the case. It should be that all residents get the equal treatment. But I started to speak with mental health board staff, because they do some of their work as fee-for-service, and there are models out there to look at that. So that's something down the road I think we could consider. It also will stop the issue that we're having right now, where folks who we fund, we refer people to them and they don't get service. And again, that's the minority of cases, but it happens often enough that I am discouraged, and I'm working with those groups to try to solve that problem.
Any other questions? Mary Alice?
I had two basic questions. My first question is I like the idea of having a lump sum for people who we're giving small amounts to. So what proportion of the people that we do give grants to would fall at that 5,000 mark?
Ooh, I should look at Kelly. Do you recall about how many agencies?
Maybe half. Maybe half?
Maybe half are under 5,000?
Yeah. I didn't think to bring the list with me of.
Yeah, I would say a third, but it's something like that.
A third to a half,
Yeah.
roughly. All right, so what is the probability? You had mentioned that there were some agencies that kind of closed down and we didn't know about it. It would seem to me like those agencies would be more likely to be under that $5,000 mark. I think that would be something that we would need to look at before moving forward with that.
Okay.
It'd be nice to know if there's a good cut point there. But I do understand administratively it makes a lot more sense. There's no reason for us to be doling out small amounts of money quarterly.
It's also the case that they would owe grant money back if that was the case, but I think it's worth having legal review about what tools we could use to get monies back.
Do we get money back? So if you can't get a hold of these agencies and they're gone, and we've already given them the money, do we get any money back?
Well, that'll be curious. I'm holding 2 checks right now for an agency where their project disappeared, and I've asked to meet with the executive director, so I'll tell you next month how it goes.
Okay, all right. And my last question is, you had mentioned that funding has stayed constant, and due to the increased administrative costs, we need to consider increasing the fund. Are you talking about administrative costs at the agencies that we're
Correct.
funding? Okay,
Yes.
all right, I just wanted to be clear about that.
So healthcare and all the things,
Okay,
inflation
all right.
essentially.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't think there's been increasing administrative costs for the social service funding, at least at the township. It seems like it's been a fairly simple process to administer.
All right, thank you.
Anything else? Well, thanks. So you can send comments and further questions to Danielle. And I want to thank Kelly Murkowski and Matt Rajek and Danielle for all the work you've put into this. I think it's just a very thoughtful and a more effective and efficient way to get these funds to the people who will need them the most.
Great. Awesome. If I could just ask for any additional comments before the end of Wednesday, because we'll be meeting and setting dates and basically communicating any changes to the agencies. So any other changes, you can send them to either Kelly or myself or both of us.
And the applications are still due April 6th? Is that the current deadline?
We would change that.
Okay.
Because we give a month to complete the application.
Yeah,
Okay.
so we're pushing things back by a couple of weeks just so that we have some time to put in this new structure in place.
Great.
So I'm curious about the proposal that you sent in terms of changing the application. Is that what they're supposed to use? Is that finalized? Is that something that we vote on? Is that something you determine?
Yeah,
How
it's-
does that get finalized?
Yeah, so typically it's been an administrative piece, and then in the past, if council/town board had things that they wanted to add or subtract, they would provide input to the staff, but it wasn't a vote on the level of the board. And so with that, especially the application will be the thing that we're releasing towards the end of the week, so if you can take a look at that. Pretty much what you'll see are things that were duplicative, we removed. We did add information that is really standard across grantors at this point about staff and board demographics. That's best practices. And we added questions about measurable impacts.
Yeah,
which
and
weren't
actually,
there.
that was the one point that I was concerned about, because I'm not sure the funding agencies, or the agencies, I'm sorry, that we're funding, are collecting that kind of data, and putting that on them at short notice, especially since we're looking retroactively, I think could be challenging.
The
So I can,
measurable-
yeah,
okay.
the measurable impact, so I'm happy to have that conversation outside
Okay.
with you, because I definitely, I know some of these agencies are not collecting that data. So,
Thank you. Okay, with no further business before the town board,
No, there's one more item. Sorry.
oh, you're right, new business. Annual town board meeting agenda.
I need to sign this.
And that's attached to your minutes in the packet. We just need a motion to approve. Is there a motion to
So
approve this
moved.
agenda? Moved by
I'll second.
Jared, seconded by Dennis. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Okay, that meeting, that motion is approved. And now, with no further business before this board, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you all.